All right, so let's take a look at a couple more features in JDBC that are somewhat advanced. You won't typically be using these operations, but they fall within the overall umbrella of transaction handling. Right? So, for instance, one of the things that JDBC allows you to do is to use scrollable result sets. Right? For instance, when you are working with the result sets, when we were creating the DAO objects, right? Typically, you get a hold of the result set, and then you can use the next function to advance the cursor to the next row. Yes, right, and just consume each row one at a time, right? And as long as you have rows, the .next function returns true, and when there's no more rows, then it returns false, and then you can fall out of the loop. Yes, that's the most common use case, right, of consuming the data one row at a time in one direction. Right, to go forward in time, go forward, one row at a time. But there's some cases where you would want to consume the data randomly, right? Instead of just consuming it one row at a time, you would be able to maybe jump around and maybe consume it 10 at a time, right? So jump and skip 10 records, maybe because you're doing pagination, right? Or you're doing some fancy skipping over multiple records, and you want to jump to maybe to the last page in a very long list of records, right? You like to be able to consume it randomly as opposed to sequentially. Okay. Well, scrollable results allow you to do that, and that's an advanced feature of JDBC. Another advanced feature is that you can, as you are iterating over the result set. For instance, one of the operations that we were looking at here was that we would decide to, depending on some logic, to maybe remove a record as you're iterating over it. Yes? Right? So we have the way we implemented that is to have an outer result set that iterates, and then an inner result set that allow you to remove a particular record. Yes? Well, that too is somewhat a use case that might be fairly useful. Right? So instead of having to deal with two result sets, the advanced features of JDBC allow you to use just one single result set. And so that as you are iterating over the result set, you might decide, oh, look at this record, let me remove this record. Right? So you can say result set dot remove the current record, the current row that I'm at. Or, right, for instance, one of the things that we've been looking at is using a result set to read data. Right? You can get a string, you can get an integer, you can get a double, you can get a date, mostly for reading purposes, yes? Well, with advanced features in JDBC, you can also update the data. Meaning, at a particular record that you're looking at, a particular row that you're looking at, you can, instead of getting the string, you can set the string. You can update the string to be something different, right? Obviously, internally, underneath, right, you're basically sending several inserts or several updates, as you are iterating over the records. Right? Internally, obviously, this gets translated into low-level SQL. Right? That is, it will be transparent to you, but all handled within the same transaction. Right? It needs to be able to lock those records so that you're not updating stale data, that you're not reading stale data or updating stale data. Right, so it manages all those locking, all those isolation levels for you, to be able to support all these high-level, all these advanced features. So let's take a look at some of them. Right. So first, the first features that we already talked about is using parameterized statements. Right. So to avoid to handle SQL injection. Right. We don't want to have. We want to avoid using the low-level statements, right? Because concatenating data opens us up for the vulnerability of SQL injection, right? Where somebody might be putting some bad strings in there with some weird characters that might ruin our query here. So prepared statements allow us to deal with that. So there's no real reason to use just a low-level statement. it's always better to use just prepared statements, right? Where it validates that the strings don't have any bad characters in there. That if we're sending a date or an integer or a double, it strongly types and makes sure that those are indeed integers, indeed doubles, indeed dates, right? So it strongly types. So certainly those are really good, good features to have. The other feature that's very useful is that prepared statements are much more performant than regular statements, right? Creating a statement is very expensive, right? The database needs to parse your statement, it needs to compile that statement, it needs to make a plan on how is it going to operate and perform that statement. And if they're all individual statements, it needs to do that for every single statement. A prepared statement allows you to reuse whatever plan and whatever compile, any statement that might have been compiled already, just reuse it and just parameterize it so that it doesn't have to re-evaluate and recalculate your statement. So for instance, if you're using a statement inside of a loop, okay, it would be very expensive if you were using a regular statement in a loop, because every time you iterate, you would have to recreate the statement and reparse it and recompile it. Instead, if you're using a prepared statement, this happens only once. Only once when you prepare the statement, and then that's it. No, never again. You only configure it, and then you can execute that statement. So it's much more performant by using prepared statements. The other feature that I was mentioning earlier is to have result sets that are scrollable and updatable. Right? Scrollable result sets allow you to not only consume the result set one record at a time forward, it allows you to also just skip so many records forward, or skip backwards, or jump to the end, or jump to the beginning. Right? It allows you to jump all around, right? So you can jump forward this many records forward, one at a time, okay? Or go backwards, right? Or jump absolutely to a particular row if you know the number of rows you want to jump to. Also, you have before first and before and after last. If you remember, when you do a result set, at the beginning, there's a cursor that points you to the current record that you're operating on. Okay, but at the very first time around, before you do a dot next, right? The record, this cursor is not actually referencing any row in particular, right? It's referencing what it's called the before first row, meaning no row at all, right? It's not referencing any row whatsoever. So before first allows you to put the record, the cursor at the beginning, before any one of the records. You can also, instead of just doing a read or get strings or get integer or get dates, you can also update integers or update strings or update the entire row, right? So you can update the values and then make the actual update and execute the update statement that updates that one row. Or as you're iterating over it and based on your logic, you decide that this particular row should no longer be in the database. You can just delete it with the results. So it would be the results at dot delete row, the current row that you're looking at. Or you can move to a specific location in the result set that would allow you to insert a brand new row. That's pretty cool, right? You're iterating over the result set, right? And based on some calculation, you decide that you need more records. That you need to insert a new record, which is pretty cool, right? And then once as you're iterating, you decide to jump to be able to insert a new record, and then you can go back where you left off, and then continue by using move to current row. Right, so wherever I had left off, right, go back to that row so I can continue iterating in that order. To turn on these features, we use the connection object, and whenever we create either the prepared statement or the statement itself, we can provide arguments, right? We can provide arguments to turn on each one of these features individually. We can turn on scrollable, right, or updatable. We can turn on updatable or scrollable, each one individually. You can turn on type forward only, meaning it's not scrollable. You can only move forward, right? So here's just a couple examples. All right.